Hi everyone and welcome to Watercolor Wednesday. So for this week's watercolor painting, I really wanted to practice painting warm skin tones with watercolor. Faces are typically pretty difficult for me, but also one of my favorite things to paint. And I'm actually really proud of this piece and I really hope you guys like it. So here I am going in with a very light orange color as the base tone. Pretty quickly after starting this piece, I decided I didn't want to outline it with my micron pens, so I went ahead and went through and I erased all the harsh pencil lines so I could let the watercolors sort of speak for themselves. My intention then became to do the outlining with watercolor, but as I progressed in the piece, I decided I didn't want to do an outline at all. After erasing all the harsh pencil lines, I went in with a darker, warm orange tan color for the shadows on her neck. I then started the base layer on her face and hand. This whole first layer is really about establishing colors and values within the skin, and then after that, more detail can be added. From my reference photo, I noticed that certain shadows on her skin were a lot more orange, and certain shadows were a lot more pink. So when painting, I really tried to bring out those colors. Watching this back, I realized something that happens to me a lot when I'm painting skin tones with watercolor, specifically with watercolor because it's very hard to go lighter with watercolor, is that I often think I'm putting too much color in the shadows or making the shadows darker than I intended in the beginning, and then as I progress through the painting, I always end up realizing the shadows weren't dark enough and darkening the shadows as I progress through the painting. Which honestly isn't a bad thing at all, especially with watercolor because it is so hard to go lighter. It's definitely better to build up those shadows slowly than to put down too much color at once and then have to figure out a way to go lighter afterwards. However, I will say that almost every time I use pure black pigment in a painting, whether that be for shadows or to darken a color, I regret it. Pure black for things you would find in nature, like skin tone, is just way too harsh and devoid of color. Almost nothing in nature is truly black or absent of color. Most things in nature that might look black are often just very dark shades of a particular color. So to make shadows or darker colors look realistic, you're much better off mixing several dark, colorful pigments to obtain a very dark color rather than a pure black. But if we're talking about abstract painting, black can definitely be useful and fun to use, though I would say it's still probably going to make your painting look more lifelike and interesting if you just do a very dark color as your black or as your shadows. The one exception to this that I use black for pretty often is actually my galaxy paintings, which I haven't really shown here on this channel, but I do find that black in those paintings can be super useful to use, especially just to darken colors. A good example of what I mean by this is the mouth color. The shadow of her mouth where it's slightly open is actually a very, very dark purple color, and then the pupils of her eyes are also just a very dark blue, kind of brown color, I believe. It's really just a mixture of a lot of colors. Also, I just wanted to say, sorry about the exposure in this part of the video. It's just a short clip, but my camera was pretty overexposed for this part and I couldn't turn it down any further. I also ran out of memory and didn't realize, so right after this there's kind of a jump in time where you don't get to see everything I did. But I have what I have and it is what it is. So anyway, what I was doing here was just kind of darkening up the shadows in her face and her neck a little bit, and then here we have the jump in time. So I think there was actually about maybe an hour and a half of painting that I didn't catch. So here you can see in the time I missed, I have painted her shirt, I have painted her hair, I have painted the background, I have filled in the shadows quite a bit, I've painted her eyebrows, painted her hand a little more, and now I'm going in and doing her eyelashes, which is always really difficult for me, particularly the top eyelashes for some reason. I always struggle with making them look realistic, or I put too many, or I make them too long, or whatever else. Anyway, I was actually really proud with how they turned out this time. Also, you can kind of see over here on the side, I have this little swatch of watercolor paper that I'm using, and I'm just using that to kind of, as I mix my colors, I'm testing them on that piece of paper to make sure they're the color I want, and make sure I have the proper amount of water to get the shade I want of that color. And I actually found that super helpful, so I don't go in with a color I don't mean to go in and ruin the whole thing, because like I said before, watercolor is really hard to go lighter with, and depending on the watercolor, it can be really hard to remove that color from the painting. Some watercolors you can just reactivate and then kind of pat off, but some of them get pretty stuck, so it's good to have that on hand, I feel like. But here I am working on her hair, and the hair I've actually never done like this with watercolor before. As I was working on the face and I decided that I didn't want to do any outlining for this piece, I realized that I was going to have to figure out how to make the hair look realistic with watercolor and not do any kind of outlining or kind of illustration type work like I would normally do with hair and watercolor. So I kind of went in with a base coat of the color that I thought her hair would be, and then I went in with darker colors on top of that, as well as more vibrant and colorful colors on top of that, where I felt like those colors were kind of popping through more in her hair where the light was hitting it. And then after I went through with a few layers of these darker brown colors to give her hair some dimension, I went in with my tiny liner brush to make more details in the hair, but that's actually a little later in the video. Now here's one of the places in the painting that I actually feel like made the painting come to life the most, and that was adding the shadows into her shirt where the wrinkles kind of were. I take a break to let that first layer of shadow dry and do the background to make that a little darker, and then after I do that, I go back in and I really fill in the little crinkles and folds in her shirt with the even darker shadow, and I just really felt like this part made the piece come to life. Right after I did it, I was like, oh cool, that's just one of the finishing touches that'll make this piece even better. And honestly, for the rest of this painting, I don't really have much else to talk about, so I'm just gonna go ahead and play the hyperlapse and let you enjoy it. Hopefully it's relaxing and fun for you to watch, and let me know what you think. and that's the finished piece. So anyways, I hope you enjoyed. Remember to like, comment, subscribe, all that jazz, and I'll see you next time.